Smart 24, driving business.
It's 5 minutes past 9 a.m. and of course you're still watching Smart Business. I'm Andrew with Mark Katsumi and Jerome Paul Sunko driving your business. Now, at this very time, we're heading straight into our business insight. But before we get there, don't forget to buy government bonds and securities with Zabu. Zabu is a platform that is from Altex, which enables you to trade stocks and government bonds for as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. And now, of course, part of this. Well, it is very simple. *292# is the code which will enable you to do that, and you'll be available with quite lots of options. You can choose to buy government bonds and securities. Yes, you can buy and sell at the same time, by the way. Yeah, so 15,000 is the minimum requirement, but you can still choose to invest more. But Zabu says, bring 15,000 and we make life easy together. Now, the market's open at 8:15 a.m., closing at 3:15 p.m., Monday up to Friday, except on the weekends and the public holidays when the markets are closed. But at least you have the rest of the 5 days to capitalize and make yourself quite some huge income for you, something very, very developmental. Now, Zabu simply says, my money, my future, and Altex East Africa says, do something new. Well, now heading straight into our insight this morning. Of course, yesterday there was the Parliament, of course, sat down and they passed what we call the Appropriation Bill. And this is still the budget, of course, still left for the President to approve it. You know, that is for the financial year 2023-2024. Well, just a highlight. Of course, we see that 52.7 trillion has been appropriated. That is for the national budget. And only 17 trillion is for service delivery. And of course, recurrent expenditures and statutory expenditures are taking the biggest shares. And of course, more taxes are to be paid by the Ugandans, something which I know you don't want to hear, but that's what is happening. And of course, Ugandans should tighten their belts. Well, we need to. It shows you where we're heading as a country, you know. More investment. Joram, I think this is something which is so scary for some people to hear that. But it's just challenging ourselves. But also, I think it points out the past experiences, the donations, the aid we get, and it's recklessly spent. We don't see economic activities like investing into the economy, people getting jobs and having export-oriented investments. Having, like, it could be direct foreign investments, but export-oriented as ways to increase our revenues. And now this is all coming back to us, of which even the taxes which you guys are going to pay, how many are working? Recently, over 2,000 staff were laid, no longer on government payroll as we speak. So, if government is laying off workers, what does it mean for the private sector? And yet there is need for taxes to be raised from these very Ugandans that are losing jobs on a daily basis. Of course, well, there is no way out here. I think we just have to work harder than probably we've been working. Anyway, discussion, and when we return, we shall delve deeper into the discussion.
Budget, which we have passed as Parliament, for heaven's sake, it is the same story as usual. On the face of it, it's going to be 52 trillion. But the bottom line, as from my analysis, money available for service delivery is going only to be 17 trillion out of 52. Consequently, there is not going to be so much money available for government to spend on the needs of people. But it's also disheartening how sometimes also how the budget Parliament behaves. We collected the whole 600 billion as exaggerated figures and went on to reallocate. Some of the money we've taken away is money that was supposed to go for provision of and expansion of availability of electricity in rural areas. To our amazement, 100 billion is taken away from that project, and we have just gone on distributing it to useless entities. Not useless, entities that fundamentally don't have an impact on the life of an ordinary Ugandan. Money has gone to Somalia Intelligence Authority, Sujui National Bureau of Statistics, Auditor General, IGG, and routinely we keep giving these agencies money by the parliamentary allocation process. High question is why? Because these agencies are not directly related to service delivery, where we come from as members of parliament. It would have been easily appreciable if we were funding schools, health centers, community roads, improving money available for National Drug Authority, to medical stores, to procure drugs for our hospital, ambulances, funding the Red Cross, no money for intern, but you have money to increase to IGG, to increase Sujui. So there is a little bit of a big question on the motive. But also when you look at the budget, as usual, the leadership of this country is still going to live in luxury. We have demonstrated that for you to maintain the presidency, it will take a cool 2 billion per day. Not only 2 billion, we have demonstrated that a lot of money placed under classified expenditure is virtually money that is now being used somehow. Imagine, money for coffee chain, for one Rabogo, is being taken now to classified. How is coffee processing classified? Under State House. From the very classified expenditure of 1.9 trillion, we just go at random and pick money 350 and give it. That means the whole narrative of classified expenditure is the way of hemorrhaging a country, taking money away from service delivery for just use anyhow. So that is also a huge revelation. The other thing is, when you look at the budget, the sad story is that you don't look at it simply because of where money will be placed, but where will money comes from. Ugandans are going to be paying higher taxes to a tune of 29 trillion from diapers, from mineral water, from so many other things where we are going to heavily tax, value-added tax. So we are going to be paying a lot of money, and there will be less money than last year for discretionary expenditure. We hope and pray that the huge 52 trillion budget is not an excuse for yielding a huge 3% for the supplementary expenditure on July 1st. We hope the Minister of Finance today will not behave the usual way it has behaved.
If you look at our budget, the total budget is 52.7 trillion. Out of that 52.7 trillion, our own domestic revenue is expected to be around 29 trillion. So we have to borrow about 21 trillion to be able to finance this budget. But if you look at the entire budget, you look at the amount we are correcting, around 20 billion is going into debt repayments and servicing. So what is available that is left is very limited, is very small. And so we have to tighten our belts, because most of the social services that we expect, we have a lot of unfunded priorities. And so Ugandans need to understand that this is the situation we are in. Part of the reason is because of the effects of COVID that affected our economy, as well as the global challenges arising out of the war in Europe. But we also think that government also needs to be more frugal in managing the affairs, the economic affairs of the country. For example, we think government should be able to implement some austerity measures to cut down on the wastage, to follow on implementation. People have accused the parliament of being very big, a very big size of parliament. I think they are right. We are a very big size of parliament, but so is the cost of administration. We have so many people who are getting salaries, even cabinet, even the cost of administration is very big in this country. And so those are things now we must discuss with limited resources. What can we do? We see there are many fleets of vehicles, government vehicles. What can we do in times like this? So it's important that government goes back to the drawing board to say, with the little resources, what can we do? Number two, how can we efficiently utilize the resources that are given? We have so many projects we have seen which are stalling, which do not have clear timelines, no clear performance measurement. So that inefficiency needs to be cleaned out so that we are more efficient. We also need to see the key programs that will boost production being implemented and front-loaded ahead. For example, parish development model, if it is going to boost production in the country, the productive activities will lead to increase the economic activity, and then government can get more resources, more revenue. But if the funding is delayed, then we are not able to realize the benefit. So we call upon government to, the productive sectors, the productive money must be quickly released and people mobilized to produce. But finally, as Ugandans, we must also wake up and know that we have to work. Every Ugandan should be productive. If you are not in the money economy, you are not adding to the growth of the GDP, you are just a consumer of what is available from the rest. We have to challenge each other to work. If you wake up, you must be able to work so that you are part of the contributors to the GDP growth. But if you are a cost center and government is spending on you, then you have a problem. So we hope that the bill will be signed, but like I said, we must be able to manage our appetite for expenditure as government because the needs are so many.
Dilapidated road infrastructure is on the mouth of every Ugandan. Road infrastructure is very critical for any developing country, and we have always seen our roads collapsing. Recently, Masaka Road collapsed. Business, the economy is going down simply because of the poor, dilapidated road infrastructure. We have the Uganda Road Fund that is mandated to periodically and routinely maintain our roads. We had earlier a budget of 467. It has now been chopped to 401. This was road maintenance. Very little money. Even before it was not enough, because the road fund actually government collects on behalf of road fund over 1.2 trillion, but only gives them less than 500 billion, which is not enough for the development of roads, for routine maintenance and periodic maintenance. But instead of increasing the fund, they have cut by almost 20%. It's unfortunate, regrettable, because currently most of our roads have outlived their design life. They need to be revamped, but we are just maintaining them. Even the maintenance money has been reduced. It's unfortunate.
The real resource envelope are available for production and investment to uplift the livelihoods of Ugandans for development is actually just 17 trillion. Because the rest is basically recurrent expenditure and the statutory expenditures. So, we are actually working for debts mainly. Let me say, the economy is not doing well. And there is also going to be a lot of borrowing. And this type of, the borrowing is a bad type of borrowing, which is, first of all, domestic. And secondly, we are not going to borrow concession loans. We are going to borrow non-concession loans. The difference is concession loans, these have some element of grant, 35% grant, and then the rest at a low interest rate of about 1%. But now, 92% of the loans we are going to borrow is going to be non-concession. Basically, I would say commercial or even beyond commercial, like to the level of money lenders. So I think money lenders out there who have money, be ready to lend the government. It's broke. But that's what they are going to lend. That's where they are going to borrow domestically. Now, borrowing domestically is very dangerous because this is where also the local people borrow. The small businesses will borrow. So there is going to be a very serious, stringent condition for doing business because people will borrow money to do business. They will be paying high interest rates. I'm likely to see high interest rates going high because there is a big borrower called the government, and the small business person is also borrowing from the same source. But on top of that, inflation, which is the double figure, about 11%, will also disturb them because now that will mean you will pay maybe the interest rate of 20%, and then you add inflation, which, you know, inflation affects you without knowing. You will find that the goods and services will cost higher when you budgeted at another. So I'm also likely to see more supplementaries being brought because the way I know the nature of this government, that's what they do.
Well, that's the budget, that is the appropriation bill 2023-2024. And of course, actually, next week we're going to be dissecting further more of these matters, seeing how, you know, sector budget allocation. But I would love to say it's going to be quite a tight year, and this is something that we need to tighten, you know, our game. And I hope we've already talked about intra-trade, and they talked about the aspect of attracting direct foreign investment, yes, which is export oriented, as some of the ways of trying to avert the balance of payment issues in the country, Uganda. Because sincerely, ideally speaking, it's not going to be easy. Of course, we shall, as Ugandans, by the way, we always complain about issues, but somehow we maneuver and go through. We pay these taxes, but well, let's hope the Ugandan Revenue Authority won't incur more deficits, you know, in terms of revenue collection regarding that. But of course, Ugandans, above all, urge to work, and road infrastructure still, if you're to look into this budget, it's still underfunded, yet it's one of the key priority areas which we need to really embrace, because we see a shortage that is likely to come in the coming months when it comes to supplies to town if we keep having these rampant disruptions of roads.
Well, when you look at the appropriation bill budget,
yeah,
for 2023-2024, it takes us back to the initial budget framework paper at the start of the year, which was 50 trillion Ugandan shillings. Now, that was the initial one that was expected to be passed by Parliament. Of course, various discussions, sittings in different committees, the National Economic Committee, and then they finally came to a 52.7 trillion shilling budget. So that is the budget that we expect.
Yeah.
But now the funny twist is in our resource basket or resource envelope, we only have 29 trillion Ugandan shillings. That is
so far
what the Uganda Revenue Authority has. That's what we have. So it's like you're saving money as a country or as an individual, and your savings are, let's say, 20 million shillings, and you want to buy a car of 40 million shillings.
40 million shillings,
so
yes.
That means you only have 20, and the other 20 you're going to get it from someone else. So that means out of the 52.7 trillion shillings, 29 trillion is what we have as a country,
what
the government has. So that means the other money is going to come in through the loans. So when you look at the same situation as the other money is going to come through the loans, again it takes us back to borrowing.
Borrowing,
And
yes.
it's a worse scenario, basing on the fact that our public debt is rising to 80 trillion shillings, has risen to 80 trillion shillings. Now also, besides that kind of situation, you realize that if we have that as a budget, if we have only that 29 trillion, it backs up the reason as to why the permanent secretary to the treasury did mention that this time around there might be no room for reckless supplementary budgets. Whereby different sectors end up calling in for supplementaries all the time, all through, because there is no money available
Very true.
to fund. And remember, there are also budget cuts that were put in place in order to see that this budget is well maintained and is kept at that 52.7 trillion budget. And one could actually approximate it to 53 trillion shillings already. Now, the question is, as we continue to borrow, our debts are going to increase.
Very true.
Definitely.
You know, and then again we're into another tough kind of situation. And the mere fact that, anyways, with the National Development Plan 3, what we need to know is that the kind of budget that we are running as a country is a program-based budget.
Program-based budget.
So money is going through various programs and not directly to ministries. So it's going through various programs that were broken down. And of course, later on in the show, Hanifa is going to be joining us to at least break this down for us, to understand more of what the legislators say about the program-based budget and what it intends to at least achieve. But what you need to know of the picture is the 52.7 trillion budget is what we have, but in our resource envelope, 29 trillion is what is available. So the remaining money, or the remaining a trillion shillings, will definitely be going to the other, it's definitely going to be got from various borrowings and all the rest. So it is something that you need to at least know for the viewer as we keep on building up to the journey of the national budget 2023-2024.
All right. Of course, more of these discussions are coming up after the break. Of course, as Joram told, shall be joined with Hanifa to break down further and what should we anticipate and what is the way out for the country Uganda to ensure at least some sort of economic growth in the coming financial year 2023-2024. Stick around. Good morning.